put out and have been putting out over the years to get people to really understand what the truth is. If you are a person who does not read the Bible or know real history, especially if you're black, it's going to be very easy to fall victim to what they're teaching. And, who are they? Really what they are no different from your pastor, your preacher, or anybody else that's pushing the Bible, because that's exactly what they're pushing. It's the Bible, just on a different, situation, you might as well say. So no different from Catholics, no different from Christians. They're pushing the same book. And we can stick with the whole thing about, Old Testament, New Testament, or what have you. At the end of the day, it's the same type of person getting you to pray to an invisible God that is not doing shit for you or anything to help you in your life and change your life, and you know that. So you have these people who are basically trying to get you to let go of where you come from and your history, to hate Africa, to hate African people, and to just forget about the truth about your history. Now, you'll hear so many of the disses, the jokes, the derogatory stuff that they say. Where do you come from? What part of Africa are you from? If you're from Africa, you're not from Africa, you're from America, you're from Israel, you're a Jew, a Hebrew, or what have you. And everything that, they say in all the ways that they put it, they can never give you any proof of any of this stuff. And that's what you gotta come away with, instead of listening to their story as far as how it seemed to fit with the Bible. When you understand history and what took place, that part you can explain. That part you can look at very clearly, as I'm about to explain, and see exactly what's going on, and you'll see how everything else begins to fold. So, again, you'll have Hebrews talk about, you are not from Africa, you are from the tribe of Judah, or you are a, Shemitic, all kinds of stuff like that. And it really goes back to the King James Version and looking at Deuteronomy 28, which of course you know about if you talking to Hebrews, and understanding what Deuteronomy 28 is talking about, and how I broke it down and explained. Yes, Deuteronomy 28 is 100% talking about African slaves, black people in America as slaves,
non-slaves,
and the whole thing is one, getting people to understand that even though the Bible is talking about us, slaves and slavery and everything like that, that it is not what you think it is. It is not the case where they want you to believe that Moses wrote this over 2,000 years ago, and it was a prophecy of what would happen to us. So when you're reading it in the Bible and us having that whole notion and mindset that the Bible is over 2,000 years old, that it's very old, it's ancient, and this stuff was written before slavery. And that aspect is very easy to get people who don't know history to fall for this doctrine, especially when everything is talking about in Deuteronomy 28 is really, it just can't get around the fact that it's talking about us as far as slavery. But the reality is the King James Version, which is where you're going to find this at, was written between 1604 1611, and slavery was already going on. And this is what you got to really get into your mind. I put these videos out to really help people understand the truth. It's not so much about trying to bash a person's belief and religion. It's about truth, plain and simple. And that's what we need to know, because we have a better, more rich history than slavery and this Bible that was given to us. So just because they're giving you a doctrine that is anti, white people, anti-European, they're really getting you to basically fall victim to the same book that Europeans gave us. And you have to remember that. So when you understand that, and understand that, yes, this is a European book. It was given to us by white men, not by a black man named King James, because he got it from the same people that the Romans got it from, which is the Greeks. And when you understand history, you can see how, all this stuff starts to fit. So Deuteronomy 28:68 or Deuteronomy 28 period, talking about slavery, again, was written during the time of slavery. Remember, King James, when you understand the history, basically gave us his version of the Bible, which is why it's called the King James Version. It's just that simple. Meaning, if it's a version, it's separate from the earlier Bibles. So it's a different version. So it's not like the originals, and you have to understand that. So in that case, you see where Deuteronomy 28 can be easily changed to fit exactly what they wanted to say, which is to elaborate on slavery. Now, I prove this when you look at my other videos, and you can go look for yourself. When you look at the older manuscripts, Deuteronomy 28, I gave the example of Deuteronomy 28:68, where it's talking about going to Egypt on ships. When you look at the older manuscripts, it does not say the same. It is different. It's not talking about going back to Egypt on ships or slaves or anything. The verse is talking about children, and you'll find that Deuteronomy 28 originally is not talking about us at all. That was changed and put in there by King James because he gave us his version. So that kills the whole nonsense that the Bible is a prophecy, and Deuteronomy 28 is a prophecy about what would happen to African people, to black people, as far as transatlantic slave trade. What was going on was already going on when he wrote the book. That's something you need to understand. Now, as far as taking the book back to African people having their hands in the creation of the Bible, nobody can give you proof of that. Plain and simple. And when you understand history and what took place, you take it back. If you want to go to the official explanation of where we get our Torah or the beginning of our Bible from, that goes back to LXX. And hopefully you're taking notes, because the stuff you can look up, they're not going to give you any of the stuff that they're talking about to look up and prove. LXX, the Letters of Orestes, is talking about the creation of the Septuagint by Ptolemy II Philadelphus, where he basically got 6 Hebrew elders, each from the 12 tribes of Israel. So 6 elders from each of the 12 tribes, which, I mean...
What we don't realize is that Grand Khan was a name for our rulers at one point. The Grand Khans. That's where you get the Grand Canyon from. That's where you get Prester John from. Prester John, the Khan, the Grand Khan.
How did he find them? And how did they find them around that time? So the Septuagint means 70, even though it was 72. And supposedly the letters is talking about these Hebrew elders coming to Alexandria, Egypt, to do a translation of the Hebrew law from Hebrew to Greek. So what's basically taking place is they are saying that the Hebrews brought with them the Tanakh, the Torah, and they brought it with them to Egypt, or they had it memorized and it came to Egypt, and they basically translated it into Greek so that Ptolemy II Philadelphus can have a copy. And letters goes on about how much gold and was given to the Jews, and how many Jews were set free, and how they made a law that if any of the Greeks don't set their Jewish slaves free, they will themselves become slaves, all kinds of crap like that that nobody can prove, and it sounds far-fetched when you understand real history. Now, the reason why that cannot be true is because the actions of the Greeks later on that we can prove. So, why would you free these people, and why would you give them gold and everything like that, knowing that you were trying to instill Hellenization on these people later on? So to have them free and grow in numbers to oppose you will be stupid when you know what your plan is. So in that aspect, we can look and see, one, a lot of people is going to tell you, that the Bible goes back to African people and everything like that. No, it goes back to the Greeks. The reason why the Hebrews need for King James to be black is because they know when you do the research, it goes back to the Greeks. So they want to say that King James was black and his version that he gave us is the real version that we should follow. And everything else before that is null and void. When you pay attention, what King James and the scholars use to create the King James version all comes from the Greek Septuagint. So you have Textus Rescriptus, you have the Masoretic text, you have the Codices, you have Vetus Latina, or Latin Vulgate, or what have you. All these books, any biblical book before the King James Version cannot exist if not for the Septuagint Greek. So in other words, any Bible that you can name would not be in existence if it wasn't for first the Greek version, and that is including your Ethiopian Bible. So again, if you're not understanding history, you're not going to know what took place as far as that aspect as well. So you'll have some Christians, you'll have some Hebrews, not many Hebrews, but a lot of people will go to the Abagarama book, Ethiopian Bible, written by Abagarama, and call it the oldest Bible ever, when no, that's not the case. So you have the Abagarama Monastery in Ethiopia, where you have supposedly Abagarama, a Byzantine royal, a white man, coming there, basically supposedly writing this large work in a day, I believe. And when you pay attention to it, I mean, it's just plain to see what's going on, the illustrations. What it is the oldest illustrated Bible. So it's very well illustrated. It is not the oldest. That is up for debate against the Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus as far as the oldest, which we know the Septuagint would be the oldest, but we don't have a complete version. And you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which you can also throw into that debate. The Dead Sea Scrolls do not predate the Septuagint Greek, by the way. So, again, when you start putting the stuff together and understanding real history and what took place, you can understand, one, where the Hebrews are confused and where they are trying to deceive you. And understanding real history and what took place is, that's the only way you're going to be able to, see through what they're saying. One, they're not going to be able to give you definitively black people creating that book. Again, which is why they need King James to be black. They're not going to be able to give you any kind of proof as far as the true history, the real history of the Hebrew people and these Jews. They do not predate the 4th century BCE, which coincidentally goes right along with when the Greeks conquered Egypt. Plain and simple. This is how Ptolemy II Philadelphus was in Kemet, in Alexandria, to get them to come there to basically do this translation, because they took over Kemet and he proclaimed himself, a ruler. You also have to understand that Israel was once Egyptian territory. It was ruled by the Egyptians. So when the Persians took over, it was still Egyptians there. When the Greeks took over from the Persians, it was still Egyptians there, Egyptians being black, African. So they would not follow. When the Greeks finally took over and conquered, they would not follow the Greek doctrine and what the Greeks was trying to instill within them. So what they did was create Judaism. And again, if you watch my videos, you heard this already before. Now, I talked about how, one, you buy Dr. Joseph Yehuda's book, Hebrew is Greek, where he proves 100% without a doubt that the Greeks created the Hebrew language as well as the Arabic language. And it's proven. There's no way around. He proves it clear as day. Nobody challenges his work. Is the reason why the book costs so much, because they don't want too many people understanding that. But it's not hard to figure out So it's not a coincidence we have the Greeks conquering Egypt, conquering Israel, which was ruled by the Egyptians, which black people was there. And then we get this doctrine, this religion of Hebrews, Judaism, around this time, where you had them basically force this doctrine onto the black Egyptians that was there, or the black Africans that was there in Israel during that time, to spread this doctrine. So when you get into Josephus talking about the Jewish war and the Jews basically, trying to go into Rome and fight for that land back, Rome as well was ruled by black people, African people, and it was taken over by the barbarians, which is the Romans. And this is where they give you the so-called fall of Rome, which you have to ask yourself, how did Rome fall when the papacy was still around? How did the barbarians conquer the Romans when they left the papacy intact, when they left the rulership of the Romans intact? Why aren't the barbarians ruling now? Because they are the barbarians. And, the people who are in control are the people who are controlling history. So they put things in any way they want to. What we have on our side is actual facts and proof and people who lived during that time, who wrote about this stuff. So the truth is out there in books. And if you're not reading, you're not never going to find it. So the reason why it seems as if, we can trace back the Hebrews so long is because we can. They really existed up until we get to the 1st century BCE. That's it. All you have to do is look at the Diadochi War, the whole war with the Jews, as I talked about in Ancient History Part 2, and understand that you have this proven history, this long period of time, where you have the wars of the Greeks fighting against each other for control of our land. Egypt and basically what we call the so-called Middle East or what have you, and other parts of Greece and everything like that. You had this large war that was taking place for hundreds of years, the War of the Diadochi, which Diadochi meaning the successors of Alexander the so-called Great, where they was fighting for hundreds of years. So during this time where they're fighting, it's during the same time where you supposedly supposed to have the Hebrews going around and conquering everything. Amalekites and the Jebusites and the Girgashites and the Perizzites and all that stuff. So what they have done, as I talked about in those videos, was basically take their own experience, their own wars that they went into, and try to, mix the story up to try to interject Jews, the Hebrews, into existence, which you only find that in the Bible. You won't find no story or real proven history about these wars of the Jews outside the Bible. What you will find is the actual wars of the Greeks, the ones who created the Hebrews. So it's there, and it's one of the reasons why, when you get into the Hebrew is Greek book, Dr. Joseph Yehuda is laying that down, and he goes in real deep about what took place. And then you got to understand, one, how they already outrightly, the Greeks, give credit to their language coming from the Phoenicians, and we know the Phoenicians was the Egyptians. So that Phoenicia comes from the Greek word phonikis, which means purple people, dealing again with the shell that emits this purple dye. So when you see so many historians and people talking about the Phoenicians and the Phoenician Canaanites and everything like that, understand that the Phoenician territory, that land, was a trade port. It was part of Egyptian territory, and it's where a lot of people came to trade with it. It's part of the Egyptian Empire, even though it's right near, not too far from Israel. But that whole stretch of land, again, conquered, taken over by the Greeks. And again, when you start to go back and pay attention to what was going on around that time, none of it, not in one place where you find a mention of a Hebrew or a Jew as far as doing anything except for in that book. And this is what you have to understand. You won't find any bodies. You won't find any civilizations, any monuments or anything to any Jewish ruler or what have you during this time. They won't give you an explanation for that. Plain and simple. So these are the things you have to take into account and the questions you got to ask yourself if you're trying to get into this Hebrew Israelite doctrine. You need to know the truth. You need to know what took place in real history. And when you look, and you be real with yourself and not try to just want to be a part of something that's anti, white folks, and something that's just, different from what you have been taught as far as the Bible or the Quran, Torah, what have you, organized religion. You need to know the history. You need to know the truth and know what you're following before you jump into it, and understand that this stuff is anti-Africa, it's anti-you. So no, we are not cursed people walking around this planet cursed by God because we broke some damn covenant.
Document in world history, so changed the world for the better, as did the Ten Commandments. Western civilization, the civilization that developed universal human rights, created women's equality, ended slavery, created parliamentary democracy, among other unique achievements, would not have developed without them. As you will see when each of the Ten Commandments is explained, these commandments are as relevant today as when they were given over 3,000 years ago. In fact, they're so relevant that the Ten Commandments are all that is necessary to make a good world, a world free of tyranny and cruelty. Imagine for a moment a world in which there was no murder or theft. In such a world, there would be no need for armies or police or weapons. Men and women and children could walk anywhere at any time of day or night without any fear of being killed or robbed. Imagine further a world in which no one coveted what belonged to their neighbor, a world in which children honored their mother and father and the family unit thrived, a world in which people obeyed the injunction not to lie. The recipe for a good world is all there in these 10 sublime commandments. But there is a catch. The Ten Commandments are predicated on the belief that they were given by an authority higher than any man, any king, or any government. That's why the sentence preceding the Ten Commandments asserts the following: God spoke all these words. You see, if the Ten Commandments, as great as they are, were given by any human authority, then any person could say, "Who is this man Moses? Who is this king or queen? Who is this government to tell me how I should behave?" Okay, so why is God indispensable to the Ten Commandments? Because, to put it as directly as possible, if it isn't God who declares murder wrong, murder isn't wrong. Yes, this strikes many people today as incomprehensible, even absurd. Many of you are thinking, is this guy saying you can't be a good person if you don't believe in God? Let me respond as clearly as possible. I am not saying that. Of course there are good people who don't believe in God, just as there are bad people who do. And many of you are also thinking, I believe murder is wrong, I don't need God to tell me. Now that response is only half true. I have no doubt that if you're an atheist, and you say that you believe murder is wrong, you believe murder is wrong. But forgive me, you do need God to tell you. We all need God to tell us. You see, even if you figured out murder is wrong on your own, without God and the Ten Commandments, how do you know it's wrong? Not believe it's wrong, I mean know it's wrong. The fact is, you can't. Because without God, right and wrong are just personal beliefs, personal opinions. I think shoplifting is okay, you don't. Unless there is a God, all morality is just opinion and belief. And virtually every atheist philosopher has acknowledged this. Another problem with the view that you don't need God to believe that murder is wrong is, a lot of people haven't shared your view. And you don't have to go back very far in history to prove this. In the 20th century, millions of people in communist societies and under Nazism killed about 100 million people. And that doesn't count a single soldier killed in war. So don't get too confident about people's ability to figure out right from wrong without a higher authority. It's all too easy to be swayed by a government or a demagogue or an ideology, or to rationalize that the wrong you're doing isn't really wrong. And even if you do figure out what is right and wrong, God is still necessary. People who know the difference between right and wrong do the wrong thing all the time. You know why? Because they can. They can because they think no one is watching. But if you recognize that God is the source of moral law, you believe that He is always watching. So even if you're an atheist, you would want people to live by the moral laws of the Ten Commandments. And even an atheist has to admit that the more people who believe God gave them, and therefore they are not just opinion, the better the world would be. In 3,000 years, no one has ever come up with a better system than the God-based Ten Commandments for making a better world, and no one ever will. I'm Dennis Prager. Join Prager University. Subscribe.